You can. Oh, this would make it better for you.
Yes.
Okay. So, as we were talking, congratulations about your practice coming along. That's one of the things that's quite useful for students to hear the Dhamma in detail like this, because that helps put together how the mind works, as well as it gives the students inspiration to practice.
Mm.
And that we had before been talking about Paticca Samuppada in the forward order, but let's look at it from the reverse order, in the sense that uh, as we begin to notice things. And in fact, even before we begin meditation practice, people do notice things. They do wake up. And so we could say that as we begin meditation, we wake up to things the way that ordinary people wake up to them. But then we begin to get in the habit of waking up and looking at what's going on. And the more we look, the more we find. The more we find um, generally has a two-step process. The more new things we find, the first thing happens is what always happens: I don't like it.
Mm.
And then the next thing that we find is, wait a minute, let's take an investigation and a little deeper and see into it. And then we find out that it's not so bad at all. And so basically, one of the conversations, or not one of the conversations, one of the threads of conversations with students is, oh, I've got that, and now I'm going along and I found a different problem. No, it's the same problem.
Mm.
And then I go along again and I find a new problem. No, it's the same problem. The problem is that when you found something, you didn't like it.
Mm.
That's what's really going on. And so we apply anapanasati at every stage of practice, in the sense of recognizing again that what I just saw, I don't like. Basically, what we're saying now is we're beginning to see it in the sense of this is dukkha, where we're really beginning to understand it from the perspective of the first noble truth, because we're actually honing in on the fact that we don't like things, and because we don't like them, that's the dukkha. It's unsatisfactory. All right. But things happen really fast in the mind that we're not really quite aware of. So let's start back with the very beginner, in the sense that when we are just beginning practice or have no practice at all, we generally catch things really late.
Mm.
But we do catch them before it's too late. An example of too late would be that if every argument that was ever started went to its natural conclusion, someone would die.
Yeah.
Why do people not die in arguments in general? Is because somebody in the room will wake up enough to say, this is going nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And it's almost always, but not always, a third party who will come in and clear his throat, or try to wake the other people up so that they will stop arguing, or even go so far as to say, this is not the time for that,
Mm-hmm.
or some other kind of intervention. But it's also true that people can do that. Let's say that the husband and wife are arguing about something, and then the husband says something, and then he recognizes he's gone too far.
Mm.
And that's when he will storm out of the room and slam the door, because he knows that this argument is going nowhere, and he's already now saw enough dukkha to shut his mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, when we see the dukkha, that's when we can have an opportunity to change. So, in a way, we could say that sati is not merely waking up, it's to wake up and see what's going on that we are already finding unacceptable. attractive. So we're already in bad feelings. How soon do we wake up? That's what it's all about. So in this example that we've already given with the husband and wife, they were already in a woeful state that is referred to as hell. A solid, deep argument that's going nowhere, where he says, yes, you can, no, I can't, yes, you can, no, I can't, or the opposite, whatever it is. This kind of conversation is hell for everybody. It's hell for both. But it's also hell for the guy who's standing by and said, listen to these two. Or don't. Don't listen to these two. And so that's the beginning of the thread of it. But if someone can wake up in their anger, for instance, he can recognize that he's arguing with his wife and that that's not necessary. He might, in fact, have the wisdom. He doesn't have to storm out because he's still angry as he storms out. He's just recognized the dukkha. He, in fact, can sit down in the room, take a deep breath, sigh out, and say, you know, you're right. And I'm sorry for arguing with you about it. Now, that takes more sati to really recognize the argument and to see that we've gone this far, but now we can wake up completely.
Yeah.
So the next time this happens, this time the guy is really fairly sharp, and so as soon as the argument starts, now he's sitting down and saying, honey, you were right last time, you're probably right this time, and I'm not even going to argue with you. Okay, so he's getting fast, he's getting sharp, but he's still got angry and upset, and he wanted to argue.
Mm-hmm.
He hadn't caught on to it quite yet. He's still now at the level, not already in hell, but he's still attached. He's still clinging. So the next time that he does this, just before he opens his mouth, he wakes up. Before the argument even starts, before he opens his mouth even, he recognizes, I don't like this, and I'm about to have an argument. Let's not. All right? Then the next time it comes by, and he can catch it even quicker than that. And so as soon as the wife opens his mouth and say, you know, I don't like that, but I don't think I need to feel the argument for it. In other words, he's really now catching it at the point of contact. Just that point of contact. So, in fact, look at how much territory in the past 8 minutes we've covered in backing things up just in the time of an argument.
Yeah.
That when the argument is full-blown, everybody's in hell, everybody's suffering. We can catch it at the time, just at the point of the argument starting. Then we can catch it just as the inclination to argue. And then we can catch it at the point of feeling. This is the sweet spot that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about. This is what he means by mindfulness at the point of contact. So that when the bad feelings come up, we can see it as a bad feeling. Okay, so now we've got a plan. All right. In fact, a way of looking at it is that people talk about meditation and psychology and defilements and all of that kind of stuff is deep. You heard that word deep used a lot.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I
so
used
deep.
to say it a lot.
All right. But a better way of looking at it is this stuff is not deep. It's just that it's going apace and we're too slow to catch it. But if our mindfulness gets sharp and gets fast, then we can see this stuff happening instead of calling it deep. It's only deep because, and it's gone. What happened? Where'd it go? What was that? You know? Oh, it must be really deep. No, it's just the road runner. That's it. It's just fast. Okay, so the sweet spot for almost all practice is going to be at this point of contact when our internal representations are, let us say, constructed. We're put together. We've got an understanding of what's happening. Then that gives rise to it contacts us. The actual real reality doesn't contact us. What contacts us is our constructed reality that we made out of bits and pieces from the outside world and bits and pieces from our past. And putting that together is called in the Pali Nama Rupa, but in the English we would refer to it as perception, or the creation process in the mind where we figure things out. Right? And that's what gives rise to a salayatana. So if we can have wisdom at the point of contact, we can manage our feelings. That's great. You could almost say that that's the point of sotapan in a way, because we can really, really get a handle on the way that we feel, and we can begin through that process to manage our feelings. In fact, we've already been practicing anapanasati in the sense of throwing the hindrances out, feeling relieved from that, and getting ourselves to into a nice, easy, good state.
Yeah.
Okay? So that's the kind of nice, easy, good state that we would want to start to maintain and stay on guard for it, so that when feelings do arise, we could catch them right then. And this would be the kind of place that we would have as a really, really excellent operating condition. This is the sweet spot. This is the way, if we can stay mindful at the point of contact, then feelings are not going to bother us. One of my examples is coming from what's happened right here in the house is that when Kitty has a tantrum, when a little kid gets upset, doesn't get what she wants, starts to cry, what do the adults do? Not generally do they rush to give the kid anything they want. No, they want the kid to shut up.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the gestures will be, you better shut up or I'll smack you. But we don't ever say anything. We just go that hand up like that. And now the kid is both afraid and in tantrum mode. Okay. And so that's because that hand came up because we don't like it. We don't like the kid crying. And if the kid doesn't see this hand and start to sniffle up and quit her bawling, we're going to put it in use, okay? It's the same story as the argument between husband and wife a minute ago, but now it's between mom and child. But if mom can be wise at the point of contact and recognize, oh, this baby is crying because it doesn't get what it wants, now mom can have compassion. Okay. We can, compassion, we can do it in several ways. One is that we can ask the child and figure out why the child is crying. Or we can merely just take the child directly into joy. And we can do that within just a few words. Aha! I bet you don't get what you want. That's why you're crying right now. Yeah. Well, I bet if you were happy, you wouldn't be crying now, would you? And so we can talk the child into it, but the important point is that the child doesn't have that mindfulness at the point of contact, and generally neither do the adults. But if we can live our lives to the point that when feelings come up, we know what we feel, then we can choose wisely how we're going to respond.
Yeah.
Now that we've got that firmly established, because that's the big point, now we can say, but wait a minute, we can back up if the mind is really sharp. We can begin to back up even further than that. And the way to do that is to what we would call examine or investigate that salayatana, or that constructed reality, because we recognize, I don't like it when the child is crying. I don't like it when the child is throwing a tantrum. Why? What is this? What is this not liking? And what is the internal representation? because in fact, um, the whole situation is not just I hear the child cry in the moment with these ears, but I process that information with an old rule. Children should be seen and not heard. Shut your mouth. Okay? In fact, what's really wrong with a child crying?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe mom would be better off and have a better connection if she'd sit down and cry with the child to find out why the child is crying instead of just wanting the kid to shut up. Okay. So
Mm-hmm.
now we're beginning to dig deeper into it. Why do I give myself bad feelings over this? And we start looking at the construction and we begin to see where that stuff comes from. So that we begin to see, in fact, how our past destroys our present moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, we can see that in the operation. Now, basically, what we can say then that now we're getting down at that level of perception, and that we recognize that perception is actually connected directly with consciousness. In
Yes.
fact, you could
Absolutely.
say that there is consciousness on both sides of perception, in the sense that we have to be enough conscious of something to actually bring it in and take a hold of it and process it. And then the result of that processing is going to be a new consciousness. So
Yes.
let's take the word seeing for a moment. The
Okay.
word seeing, I see the tree versus I see what you mean. Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
see what you mean had to take a lot of processing.
Mm-hmm.
So we begin to understand how the mind processes, how it begins to mold stuff over.
Mm-hmm.
That in fact we can begin to watch that process while we're sitting in meditation, so long as the processing is wholesome.
I
Because if
see.
we catch it as being unwholesome, we don't need that. Out that goes.
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
should I sit here and process? Because if I process it knowing that it's unwholesome, I'm going to wind up with an unwholesome salayatan and an unwholesome feeling also when it impacts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now at that level of perception, we can begin to see, oh, well, how am I making these thoughts up? What is the data that's used? Why am I using old data when I could be using more correct data, more current data? And so now we're down at that level of perception. The
Mm-hmm.
next level down, we can understand it from the position of not taking any objects for perception. What do you mean by that? Well, I means if I'm open my eyes and I'm looking around, I don't allow the eyes to fixate on any one thing long enough to have a thought about it. That we keep moving and keep moving and keep moving. Uh, in fact, at this level, we're really at the opposite of going deep.
Yes, we're going faster.
We're going really in the opposite direction. We're really making the mind expand. We're really starting to pay attention to a whole lot of stuff, but we're not really strongly paying attention to anything.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
So we become objectless. And in that regard, that begins to then disassociate or break the connection between our perception and the consciousness,
I
so that
see.
we don't spend time perceiving. The only thing, in fact, that we are perceiving is that we are conscious, and that perception is constantly moving around so that it doesn't come up with any results or an internal representation or realization that is called salayatana.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so this is now um, about as far as we can go, is to get down to recognize that we can take that consciousness and unbind it from perception, so that the only kind of perception that is left is that we are not giving any food to the perception other than just raw consciousness, but it comes in at such a flood. You see, here's what's really going on is that we could be conscious of many hundreds of thousands of things happening at very, very rapid succession, but we're not, because we'll grab one, we'll come in here and we'll process it. It's almost like walking into the library, going to the card catalog, searching through the card catalog to find a card for that particular one, okay? And while we're doing that, we're missing out on the fact that we're just completely surrounded by a million books because we're looking for one of them.
I
This
see.
is literally, you can't see the forest for the trees. What does that mean? It means that we keep picking up one tree and then one
At the
other
time.
tree and one other tree and
Yeah.
perceiving it and conscious of it and having feelings about it, where in fact by doing so we're missing out on the whole forest.
I see.
Another way of talking about it is by using the word gazing. Do you know what I mean by gazing? Normally we don't gaze. What we do is that we look
Stare.
at something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gazing is open and looking, but not at something. Basically, what that means is that, okay, here's an example. The farmer is on this side of the field. He stands up from whatever he's doing, and he gazes across the field to the row of trees that start the forest. And there he's just looking. He's not looking at anything. Generally, if he's looking at something, he will miss something else. But if he is not attached to anything, then anything that moves, and he'll see it. He'll see anything that moves because he's gazing. But if he is watching someone, and in fact, if one person stands up and he's watching them, then he's not going to see many other things that are happening.
Yeah.
This is in fact used in warfare a lot. It's called a distraction. Okay. Now there is a YouTube video. I don't know the name of it, but it's possibly easy to find. And what it is it's a story about perception like this, and it's told the students to keep their eye on the ball and count how many times the ball does such and such, like pass from hand to hand or something like that. And here you
I've
have
seen this
5 or 6
one.
people
I
pass that
remember.
ball
I
around,
remember
and
that.
this guy comes across and stands in the front of them and waves his
Yeah.
arms as a gorilla in a
In a
costume, and then
pair.
moves
Yeah.
off
I
stage, and
remember. I
very
remember.
few people catch that.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you gaze at the film, or if you just watched it without the instruction of count the number of times the ball is passed from hand to hand, and just gazed at the video, you would see it. But no, you were told to look for something.
Yeah.
And we followed orders. And because we followed orders, we did not see what we needed to look at. So, in a way, this is not just talking about it at Paticca Samuppada level of an instant in time while we're sitting in meditation and watching how the mind works. This actually winds up being a new focus on life. Just don't pay attention to anything, and that way you can allow everything in. What an apt time to freeze.
You're back. You're back.
Okay, so this is kind of a new way of thinking is that, yeah, we spend far too much thinking things over, mulling them over, and a better way of doing it is just merely staying in our senses as much of the time as possible. The more time we're spending in senses, the less time we're spending in processing. And what happens when we're processing? We wind up constructing trash images based upon our own past, and then we give ourselves bad feelings about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That in fact, going back to the example of the child crying, we could listen to it as if it were music and just allow the sound. without having to make the judgments and pulling it together and saying that it's bad because we have bad feelings.
I see.
Okay, so this is at a level where we're back very close to the beginning of the sequence of events of Paticca Samuppada. And what we're really doing is that we're basically going back into the senses
Yeah.
and out of our mental system that we use. And so, literally, we're more and more in the here now. That what takes us out of the here now is our own perception system. And so, with this kind of talk, people can understand, wow, what an inspiration to recognize that I don't have to process everything. I don't have to take things as an object,
Yes.
because that's when we perceive it in such a way based upon, now that we've taken it as an object, now we have to objectify it with our own past and present it then to the mind as a realization that then we have feelings about. But really, the way to enjoy life is just by experiencing it, because there's
Yeah.
so much happening all at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow, there's
Absolutely.
so much going on, but we're missing it while we're processing it.
Yes.
And so, using that example of the gorilla passing the screen, guess what? That's our whole lives. Everyone is going around trying to count how many times the ball is passed, and we're missing the gorilla in the room.
Yeah. That's so true.
That is so true. So, uh, learning how to stay in the senses is something that we are actually practicing in Anapanasati.
Yes.
Is to feel good and then be in the body, be in the senses, experience the body, including the eyes and the ears and the in the sensory input, and just
Yeah.
enjoy the fact that, wow, we're in such a marvelous universe. What a dance! Is the Hindus call
Lila.
it Leela, the dance of
Yes.
life. Yeah.
Yes. I found it very beautiful. I searched upon it. It's very beautiful.
Okay, so this is actually the teaching of Paticca Samuppada, and you can see how the whole thing fits into the second noble truth of where does the suffering come from? Because we're manufacturing it, and we're manufacturing it in the mind, and we're doing it in stages. And all of it has to do with the fact that we are messing with and corrupting and winding out getting the wrong information about the reality of the moment. And then we're processing it wrongly and winding up suffering.
Mm,
But in fact,
absolutely.
this actual reality that we're in, this jungle that I am in, is actually quite safe. It's very
Mm-hmm.
nice.
I see.
And so, staying in the senses with the body and the feelings, and notice your touch and the body's postures, to know what you're hearing, to know what you're seeing, and to spend the time in the senses, but not on any particular thing. At this level of practice, we're just letting it all kind of flood in. And this also fits in very well with the understanding of the cause effect
Mm,
that we know so well, the causality. Now, one of the things that humans are just beginning to understand is that there is a deep underlying cause and effect that happens at the molecular level, and it also happens at high speed. Why do I talk about it at high speed? Is just look at a photon. Let's talk about, they say that about the fastest thing there is the speed of light. Oh no, something's much faster than that to control the speed of light. There are causes and conditions and causalities. For instance, you know that light is a wave, right?
yeah.
That means it goes up and down and up and down. What are the causes that make
For
it
the
go
ups
up when
and
it
downs.
gets up and then starts to make it go down when it is down? Because in fact, this stuff winds up being very complicated. And so the physicists have come to understand that there is a law called causality, but it operates so fast that we'll never be able to measure it because any measuring instruments will have to go through multiple cause effects to do the registry. That we can't
Mm-hmm.
get it so fast. I mean, we've already got cameras going at 1 billion frames a second, which is down at 1 frame in a nanosecond. And we know
Mm-hmm.
that light travels about 11 inches. And so you can actually see that thing go from here to there as the frames go by. And so you can it's really interesting. They've got a picture of a Coke bottle and a high speed camera and a laser on YouTube. And it's brilliant to understand that, yeah, things really are happening so fast. And
I'll
what
look
is
it up.
it? And what is the speed of this causality? We don't know. But we do know that there are hundreds of billions of molecules all over the place. They're all in motion and in a dance,
It's
all
marvelous.
caused in rhythm or in motion because of this law of nature called causality.
I see.
Okay, this is what gives rise to the awe of, wow, there is so much going on. And the human mind is so slow that we rarely pick up on exactly how fast things are changing. Everything's constantly in flux, everything is in motion. But it's only when we're able to gaze, for instance, gazing at the forest, can we see anything that moves. But in the fact, we begin to see, wait a minute, everything is moving, everything is in
Yeah.
motion.
Yeah.
But it used to be that we could only pick up something that was really big. It had to be a really big movement in order for us to catch it. Now, as the mind gets fast and gets very subtle and very watchful, we begin to pick up on very, very slight movements.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's all just a dance, a marvelous dance.
Yeah. The funny thing is, these things get almost like instinctual in some way because you're speaking in terms of causality, and all these past weeks I've been thinking in terms of cause and effect to the point of like imagining myself as a result of an immense chain of causes and effects from the start of the universe until this point. And even if I go about my day just a series of like just a chains of causalities. There are like results like from yesterday and the day after, and like going back to the point of my birth. So I cannot even fathom a point where everything was like static, and I can say that's it, and then that's how I should process things from this point forward, because there is no such point. There is only the point where I can like uh, grasp the things that are happening as fast as I can, but that's the best I can do.
Mm-hmm.
That's literally
But
the best I
as you
can do.
continue, but as you continue to do that, several things will happen. One is that your ability will will speed up, your skill will be developed, and also your satisfaction will seepen or solidify into things are really nice. Why should I
I
make a
see.
plaque when we've got everything we need? We already got everything. We don't need any of that.
I
But
see.
here it
I
is.
see.
Everything is good.
I see. I see.
And so that's the way of practicing Paticca Samuppada. But we don't really have to go down to the levels that we've been talking about because what we really can say that Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was pointing out is that if we can be mindful At that point of contact, when the feelings arise, and merely only have an intellectual understanding about perception, then that's good enough.
I see.
But you can go down and experience that stuff, and you can do it without having to go into the high jhanas. In fact, the way that I'm describing it to you would be a state of first jhana, but that it fully understands perception and consciousness because we can see it at that level. However, there is the fourth jhana where the mind gets so firm and so sharp that we can go down and actually cut it off at perception and
I
consciousness,
see.
so that we can see that the only perception we do have left is the perception that there is consciousness, and
Mm-hmm.
that the consciousness is unbounded or unbound to the perception.
They are.
When it's completely unbound, then there's nothing left. But there is that time when it's unbound enough to where the only perception that we have is that we are conscious. And we can see, and we can hear, and we can feel, and we can touch. Or things basically are touching us. It's not so much that we see actively, it's things arrive at the eye.
I see. I see.
All right,
That's funny.
um, so at the level of the fourth jhana, these things are talked about quite specifically as um, unbound consciousness is referred to by Bhikkhu Bodhi as infinite. Well, the Buddha didn't have a concept of infinite. He was talking about unbound, or
I
not
see.
in a box, okay, no boundaries. That's what the Pali word is, actually, is without bounds, or without bonds, or without connections. The same thing happens with the body also, is that we begin to lose touch with the boundaries of the body, that the body feels big. Sometimes it seems to soar 60 feet in the air, that it's so far to the ground. Other things like this, but you can also understand that, wait a minute, we're actually really toying with perception right now because it's not
Mm,
bound to the things that it used to be bound to.
I
So if
see.
perception becomes unbound to gravity, then we're going to perceive being 60 feet high, floating in the air, flying on a magic carpet. Our own butt,
I
by the way,
see.
is that magic carpet, I guess.
I see. I see.
All right. And so the body loses its boundaries. Consciousness loses its boundaries. Then perception gets so weak that it's called neither perception nor non-perception. And the
Mm,
example is a clay bowl that has had oil in it. Once you empty the bowl, there's no more oil. I mean, you can't cook with it or anything. There's no oil left. But if you rub your finger around the bowl, you can still detect that there is oil there. Okay. So
I
this is
see.
the way of looking at perception, is that there's not enough to process anything, but there's only enough of it to know that there is consciousness, or the input is still coming in.
I see.
But if it's completely broken, then the fourth state of the fourth jhana is nothingness. There's nothing left because
I
that
see.
connection is completely broken.
I
All right.
see.
And so these things can be experienced in the high jhanas, but it won't do anyone any good if they don't understand it through the process of paticca samuppada. See, the Buddha knew those fourth jhana states, but he didn't understand them very well.
Mm,
He could just do it. Now that we have through him the understanding of how the
the
mind works
context.
with Paticca Samuppada, we can understand the value of the fourth jhana, and understand that, wait a minute, we can get the benefit without all of the work of getting the mind into that state. That first jhana will do. That we can have what we call vipassana jhanas, of the insight into perception. We can have the insight into consciousness.
Hmm. So the way I should practice, I should aim to go to the first jhana to try to.
Yes, you can. Uh, every time that you recognize that the mind has wandered away from anything that would be wholesome, then you can say, wait a minute, I can stop that and I can come back. I can take a deep breath. I can relax. I can feel
Yes.
good. And I can bring myself into a happy, contented state. That's first jhana. It's got all of the factors. It's got the attitude of the winner. It has the right effort. It has the right sati. And it's got the right investigation to bring the mind into that state. Humans pass
Okay.
in and out of that state on a regular basis, but many of us don't
Yeah.
spend much time in it.
Yes. That's kind of the. I won't say like every time, but it's 70% of the time while I'm meditating, I'm experimenting these things you just said, like and hindrance comes, and then I'll, okay, I see you, go away,
Uh-huh.
and then that's the default state almost, like.
Excellent.
So
Excellent.
that's first jhana.
Yes.
Okay.
If it's got the factors of first jhana, and if you see, one of the problems with translations,
Mm-hmm.
especially if the translator doesn't quite understand what's going on, but he thinks it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, he will add his own importance to the translation.
I see.
Where much of this stuff is actually quite ordinary. Humans do it all the time. It's just a description of what's possible and what's able. But when it gets into the literature from the Pali into the English, it's highfalutin.
I see.
Instead of just a happy little smile, they have to use words like bliss. Other words would be uh, exalted. You've heard all of this really, really highfalutin language that comes out of Christianity
Mm-hmm.
to talk about ordinary things, and when we read it in the sutras like that, we have the idea that John is really high, is really special. No, it's not.
And I cannot attain it. It gets
No, it's not.
very far away thing. Yeah, yeah.
But we can practice to control it.
I see.
And when we're practicing to control it, and we have that, the quality that we're looking for is sukha. That's the quality, satisfaction. Wow, this is okay. And in fact, it's in that state of satisfaction that we can now begin to gaze, not just with the eyes, but with everything, to not focus on anything, because everything that we focus on is already inherently satisfactory.
I see. I see.
And so that's that first jhana, is that jhana that is hallmark, the point that's important. All of the other factors have to be there, but the outcome, or the let us say the last item on the list, is that sukha, that complete satisfaction that's built in the fact that I know that I can do this, that I've got that strength of mind, that can-do attitude. All of that stuff culminates in
I see.
and so that first jhana then is the state to hang out. And so this is why we have the quality of to develop the skill to get into it easily, and to develop the skill of maintaining it. Because then that whole quality has that wisdom at the point of contact. In fact, if you're kind of open to what's going on, we don't even get to that point. We're just sitting there and just watching stuff happen, and we're not doing a whole lot of processing and making
Yeah.
choices about it.
Yeah.
Not so hard to do, and a lot of fun, but it's not productive.
Mm.
So we have to give ourselves permission also that, hey, you don't have to be productive. You can be happy
Yes.
instead.
Yes.
Enough of this greed. We don't need greed. We don't need it. Makes
Yeah.
us unhappy. we've come to understand that we're not really in it for the money anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, this has been a good chat. Do you have any questions about it?
No, uh, I'm usually trying to like just enjoy everything you said. Try to practice, experience it, and then I'll go have my questions like in another time. They're not so important right now.
Nothing's important enough to even sweat. Excellent. Okay, Arthur. Well, we'll catch you later then. This,
Okay, I see you
this has
later.
been a
Thank you
delightful
again.
conversation. I really
For
enjoyed
me
our
too.
company. All righty. We'll see you.
Thank you. Thank you.